generate much, it will have a contribution for your junior research, for the junior researchers, the PhD students in development their research and for establishing collaboration, sharing knowledge and knowing each other's culture. So on behalf of the organizing committee of the CAAD organizations, I would like to thank you for participating to this workshop, for our joining students and for our panelists and for all the community who are now following us through all over the world. The event is publicly announced through YouTube. You can follow us lively for 3 days. We have organized this event as a 3-day event in the same hours of the day. And the structure of the event will be such that there are 5 student research presentations each day from 5 different sister organizations from 5 different continents. And there is a panelist groups that is created by the representatives of the sister organizations. So each student will have 3 minutes live presentation time, and then each student has already assigned 2 panelists that will review their research in depth for 5 minutes, and the remaining parts of the remaining left part, which is 7-8 minutes, will be used as general discussions by other panelists and other PhD students as well. So at the end of the day, we will send to all you who are now following us through YouTube channel the polling to choose for the best presentation of that day. So all these polling will be repeated for each day. So we will have 3 panelists for best presentation award, and that will be the best presentation will be chosen as in the second round by the panelist group and will be announced through the websites. The winners, first, second, and third winners will be announced through the website the next week. By saying that, I would like to give now words to our other presidents of the sister organizations for their opening speech, and then afterwards to the Katy, who will be Katy Veliko, Arcadia president, who will be the moderator of this day for with me together. So I'm not going to maybe probably start with you, Katy, and then following the other sister organizations presidents.
Hi, thank you, Virgil. It's great to be here and to see everybody. My name is Katy Velikov. I'm the president of ACADIA, which is the Association for Computer-Aided Design and Architecture, and we represent the CAAD organization of North America, the US, Canada, and Mexico. And if there's a kind of silver lining to some of this pandemic, it's that all of the CAAD organizations who typically have some relationships were able to kind of get together and start to organize an event that's a kind of truly global event. This is something that we probably couldn't do without the conditions of the current event, or we wouldn't have thought of doing to organize such a collaborative event that enables expanded opportunities for communication and collaboration among our various communities of knowledge. And it's going to be great to see how doctoral research is done all over the world and from different institutions, different methods, compare different methods and approaches. So I'm really excited and looking forward to this.
Thank you very much. Probably we can have now Sheriff Salam for President of ASCAD.
Thank you, Virgo. Hi, everybody. It's really great to see everybody in this very exciting opportunity and event. I'm Sharif Abdel Mohsen. I'm president of ASCAD, the Arab Society for Computer-Aided Architectural Design, which involves the North Africa and Middle East region. it's really exciting to witness this opportunity and the birth of this exciting event, which apart from it's not just about doctoral research, but it's also about cross-culture and exchange between different research cultures, and introducing all the participants, academics and students to these notions of shared values, and all colleagues coming to join in this exciting effort. I think this is a witness to this kind of first step towards increasing the synergy between the different CAAD societies, and I hope this effort continues. As Kathy was saying, I think this is one of the benefits, at least, of the conditions we're in, that we get to meet together in a much more smoother format. And I think it will help boost a lot the collaboration and communication across continents, and hopefully everybody will enjoy this opportunity and get the best out of it. And looking forward to see all of the exciting research going on across the world, literally. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sherif. And then I will give the word to Christiane Herr, the president of CAAD.
Hi, everybody. Yeah, I'm Christiane Herr, also called Candy. And I can only echo what the other presidents have already said. It's a great opportunity to come together and to look at CAAD research from a truly global perspective. And this meeting is quite a rare occasion, because we've had people attending each other's conferences, but we've never had everybody in one room. And I really hope this is going to become a regular meeting, a regular event. So for you PhD students in here, it's a brilliant opportunity, because there's a lot of experts gathered in this meeting that would rarely come together in one physical room. So I think we really can make use of the silver lining that Kathy mentioned the pandemic is offering us. So thanks a lot, and enjoy the day.
Thank you, Christian. Candy. And the last word I will give you to the president of CAAD, David Sperling.
Hi, everyone. It's a pleasure to welcome you to the first World PhD workshop on CAAD. It's important to remember that we started this coordination this year on March with a focus on the thoughts and challenge and response to the pandemic context, and to expand our activities between our societies beyond CAAD and other past initiatives. Today, we are in this workshop with a lot of PhD researchers, and thanks to them, to the panelists, and to the sister society presidents that with their endurance became this reality. And I think that, as our other presidents, they say, I think that recognizing our singularities and the innovative research in the area are undeniable, the richness of our joint work here. And on behalf of the CAAD, I wish our participants an excellent meeting and a long life to the World CAAD PhD workshops.
Thank you, David. And with the last words of the presidents of the sister organizations, now I would like to give the word to today's moderator, Kathy Bellico, to run today's workshop. So I think Koray will share with us the schedule of today's workshop, if I'm not mistaken. And Koray, are you here?
Yes, I'm just putting it on the screen. Can you see this? We have panelists from 5 sister organizations. Today we're with Dagmar Reinhardt from CAAD and Jane Scott from Acadia, Federico Braida from CAAD, Huda Salman from ASCAD, Jose Pinto Duarte from CAAD, and again from CAAD, Dietmar Köring will be with us. And we will be discussing the researches of the 5 panel PhD researchers here: Chitrash, Bissonette, Adam Sebastian, Alberto Fernandez Gonzalez, Igor Laqua, and Rasha Sukuri. And I would like to welcome to you all. And I think we will start with Chitrash here.
I think we should give the word to the Kathy, and she will be running the next workshop session.
Great. I just, Cora, do you have a slide of the reviewers as well today?
Yeah.
Oh, great. And so today we also have, and I think Corey went through this, but Dagmar Reinhardt representing Cadria, Jane Scott representing Acadia, Federico Braida from CAAD, Huda Salman from ASCAD, Jose Pinto Duarte from CAAD, and Dietmar Köring from CAAD. And the way that this we structured these this workshop is that we tried to have doctoral faculty and researchers from each of the organizations be part of the discussants. So each day we will have different representatives from each of the different from all of the sibling organizations, and they will be the kind of discussant panel for each of the doctoral presentations. So we're going to have a brief presentation by each of the students, followed by a discussion. Will we just jump into the presentations, Korai? We'll start with Chitrash.
Hear me.
Great. And the panelists have had a chance to review the materials beforehand, so they have come prepared with questions to discuss.
Yes, can you hear me, Katie?
Yes.
Okay. Yes, hello, I'm Chitrash Bissonette. I'm currently a second-year PhD student at the University of Xianjiatun, Liverpool, in China. The title of my study is The Distinction Between Epistemic and Pragmatic Actions in Digital Design. And I am interested to investigate digital design activities in architecture geometry rationalization. And to do so, I will investigate related theories, especially one that distinguishes between epistemic and pragmatic kinds of action in problem-solving environments. And this study is from a seminal paper entitled On Distinguishing Epistemic from Pragmatic Action in the Game of Tetris. It was published in the year 1994. And in that study, the authors, David Kirsch and Paul Maglio, come up with the definitions. And they were firstly rejecting the traditional notions of planning theories, especially saying that there is planning first and then followed by execution, these linear traditional models. In their study, they carried out empirical studies, studying players playing Tetris. And in their observations, they recorded that players perform actions that did not follow a linear plan as would have presumed traditional theories. And from there, they come up with this, they distinguishes superfluous activities that was previously not considered as epistemic actions. And they argue that these activities are actually very important because they benefit mental computation. And I see that this is actually quite connected to design because we often try to create intentions and we create goals. And in order, what we do else is we try to move towards those goals. The big difference between design and Tetris is that Tetris, the game of Tetris, has a fixed goal and design has a negotiable goal. And what I am interested to look is, does an action, if an action starts as a pragmatic action or an epistemic action, does it stay in the same category or does they shift category? And I will, in order to do so, I will conduct an experiment, an empirical experiment with designers from different backgrounds. And what I will record, I will use protocol analysis to do so. And I have not yet carried out, but I am expecting to carry out this experiment and find out. Yes, thank you. Hello.
Yes, we are here.
Great. And we're going to be speaking about each one after each one, right? Correct?
Yes, after each one, we will have a critics of their assigned panelists and then general discussion.
Okay, great.
All right. Can I start then?
Yes, of course, Huma.
Thank you.
Huda.
Huda Salman. My PhD really was involved as well in same empirical studies that you're talking about. So you took me back to 10 years, 10 years when I had my empirical studies for the PhD. It's really interesting the way that you are devising the experiment. You're looking at the different coding categories that you have presented. And also the relation between the main hypotheses that you have presented as well. I have a few questions about the experiment itself, because as you said, you are in the pilot stage of your studies and you're looking to devise a nice study to implement the hypothesis and see how the connection between the two epistemic and pragmatic actions will be in the digital design. So I would like to ask about the phase of the design process you are focusing on. Secondly, the level of the samples expertise, because this wasn't really clear as much. You mentioned here as well in the verbal presentation, you mentioned the expertise or the designers or the expertise of designers. So what level of expertise you're looking at? Because there are major differences between novice designers and expert designers.
Yeah.
And also the depth of inquiry into the suggested questions that you are really looking to answer within the use of protocol studies.
Could you please repeat the first question, because I did not have time to write it down. Okay. Sorry.
We'll take it one by one then.
Yeah.
What is the level of your sample in terms of design expertise? Are you looking for expert designers or novice designers?
Actually, I'm planning to have different levels of expertise. So it will be novice, intermediate, and experts. Because of COVID-19 and travel restrictions, I wanted to carry this experiment with practitioners, but because of the travel restrictions, I am not sure. But because also I am in a university, in my institution, I plan to carry out this experiment with different levels of expertise. And I hope to find the differences in the patterns, that is the shifts. If, for example, if an expert designer perform more epistemic actions as compared to a novice one, because in the previous study on Tetris published in 1994, they noticed that experts perform more epistemic actions. But the main question, what I actually want to observe is almost a categorization of actions. That is, in the game of Tetris, from their writing, they say that in their findings, you will see that an action is starting as pragmatic always ends up as pragmatic. The point of conducting this experiment is to show that maybe there's a potential that an action does not end up as pragmatic or vice versa. So yes, this was my answer to the first question. Yeah.
Yeah. And this is, I think, why you mentioned 3 to 6 participants. You weren't really specific in the number. So if you're looking at 6, probably you will be able to have a comparison between the two groups, the professional or the more experienced and the novice.
Yes.
But at the same time, I would think the level of inquiry will depend totally on the quality of the transcriptions and the protocols that you're going to collect.
Exactly.
So, and you are looking at a novel, let's say, method of collecting this during COVID and the restrictions that we have. So it would be very important for you to look at the level of expertise, because if someone is experienced with the tools that you are asking them to use, then the quality of the transcription will be very good in terms of how you're going to analyze them, right?
Yes.
It's a very time-consuming process you've picked for your analysis, right?
Yes.
You know that.
Yeah.
Okay. That's the one.
That's the nature of protocol studies, if I'm not mistaken. Right. Yeah.
Yes, definitely. Just to let you know that the numbers are very important, and the validation of data is very important, because we can't really look into more than, as you mentioned, 6 is the maximum. And it depends on all the difficulties that you're going to face and the challenges during the process of collecting those protocols. In my time, for instance, I collected 10 to 12, and I validated only 4 for the purpose of the inquiry I had. And those are the most valuable ones that I could really depend on and then code and, go through all the steps that I needed to. Yeah. So just be careful, plan ahead as you're doing now.
Yeah.
And I think you will get very good results based on that.
Is it possible to ask questions to?
Yes, definitely.
I wanted to, but in your experiment, did you train the participants to verbalize, to think aloud, actually? Because I was reading, I don't know yet how valuable it will be, but I read that maybe training participants to think aloud might be a way to actually, or in another words, just increase the probability to have good verbal data. Yeah,
that's right. I haven't trained them as such, but I show them a clip just to give them an idea on how they relate their actions verbally and physically. And being able to express those. You will get probably subjects who are like English, their second language, especially in China. So you may get, other kind of challenges because of the language. So it depends on what language you're asking them to verbalize with. And also you could just prompt them to speak while doing. If they stopped speaking, then just prompt them. And tell them that they have to continue speaking and verbalizing about the actions and the thinking going on in their minds. That's very important. But I think nowadays it is much easier because of YouTube. YouTube and YouTuber do different activities and talking through them. So it is common nowadays more than, let's say, 5 or 10 years ago. Yes. So I haven't trained them, but as I said, just showing them a clip and what does it mean? Yeah, I explained that to them. And as I said, from the 12 clips that I collected, I used only 4 for the analysis, which is the main study. Yeah. So you will probably have a similar experience, I would say.
Thank you.
I'm going to jump in now because we're going to move to the next discussant, who is Federico Braida from CAAD, who will ask the next question, and then after a kind of 10-minute discussion, we'll have a kind of 7-minute general discussion with questions from the entire panel.
Hi, good morning, good afternoon.
We cannot hear you. Hello?
You are muted.
Is now it's okay?
Yes, yes.
Yes, sorry. Hi, good morning and good afternoon. My name is Frederico Braida. I am a professor at Federal University of Juiz de Fora in Brazil. Juiz de Fora is a city on the state of Minas Gerais, but it's very close to the city of Rio de Janeiro. I am a member of the International Committee of CAAD. First of all, I'd like to congratulate all sibling CAAD organizations for the World CAAD PhD workshop. It's a pleasure to be part of this event and have collaborated with the organization participating since the first meetings. If on the one hand, these days, because of the pandemic, we are prevented from meeting physically. On the other hand, we can experience even more the potentials in the meeting, in the cyberspace meetings. I regret in my PhD research days, I didn't have this opportunity to share my research with other researchers around the world. Then enjoy it. Dear Chitrash, I want to start by congratulating you on your research. I'm sorry that you had to change your methodology because of the COVID-19. The pandemic has caused changes around the world. But in your case, I think the alternative methodology is correct. Your presentation was complete and the research aim and your hypotheses are clear. Your questions are, can epistemic actions be identified both sides of the plan in the execution loop? Is the categorization between epistemic and the pragmatic absolutely or fluid in the digital design to make context? If I am not mistaken, you have already demonstrated by proposing 3 scenarios that your hypothesis is valid. Your hypothesis is, in the context of design, epistemic and pragmatic actions cannot be categorically distinguished. This is the question that I would like you to answer at the end. Do you believe that at the end of your research, your hypothesis will be confirmed or rejected? Another question, are you considering the distinction between epistemic and pragmatic actions in a digital design context? Do you believe that if you were observing designs outside of digital context, the results would be different? My question is, what is the specificity of the digital context for your research? And the last question is, why are you concentrate only on architectural geometry rationalization? Feel free to respond all of them or just think about these questions in the future. Thank you very much and congratulations.
Thank you. In response to the first question, I think, as you mentioned, the scenarios shows that the categorization is probably not working, because an action starting as pragmatic and ending up as pragmatic, there may be, yes, but also there may be an action turning out to be into the other category. What I hope to find is to actually calculate the percentage, how much of these actions stays in the same category or how much jumps category. And for the yes, yeah, for the second question, why in the digital design context, there's a fundamental So difference between the game of Tetris and digital design or design in general is that Tetris has a fixed goal or well-defined goal. And design, in the process of designing, the goal changes. You don't know the goal before starting to act. And this is something, and actually this links to the third question, why I choose geometry rationalization. Architecture geometry rationalization, you have desires and you have intentions to rationalize something. It could be, for example, when you tessellate a facade, it could be that the facade you want to have panels as unique as possible or as uniform as possible in regards to their shape, sizes. And these are kind of intentions that you create prior to start designing, to start rationalizing. And this is what I want to also observe. I did not mention it, but working, because this is a work in progress, working these days, I realized that there is intentions inside the geometry rationalization that I could also find a mapping between how epistemic maps between pre-rationalization concepts or post-rationalization concepts or co-rationalization concepts. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Congratulations.
Thank you.
I'm going to open it up now to any general discussions. We might have a slightly shorter general discussion because we went a little bit longer with the first question, but if there are any general questions from everyone on the panel, and I'd love. I think that that Chitrash would love to hear them or comments. And if not, perhaps Huda or Federico, you might continue one of the conversations that you had already started.
Yes, Dietmar.
Yeah, I just want to jump in with a short comment. Thank you for the presentation. I just had a brief look also at your poster, which is very clear in what you're doing. Sometimes I'm missing a little bit more the theoretical background because also certain stuff started in the 60s. For that, I just want to, let's say, advise you or link you to an article maybe or a paper which might be helpful from Reynolds Glanville. It's called actually Researching Design and Design Research. That must be quite helpful.
Yeah, I'm actually using Glanville's work to actually not only guide me, but to actually understand our actions and understand in a better light what is epistemic, what is pragmatic, what are those categories actually? Where does the change happen?
Sounds great. Yeah, maybe so. Yeah. Just on the paper, some of the.
Yeah, I did not. Yeah.
Great, thanks.
I had a question. Really, just picking up on what the impact of this research is going to be. Is it something that you feel will be of benefit to designers themselves or to software developers? Where do you see it fitting in?
Well, this is always a tough question, but the value of this, of this research, I think it will shed a light on a previous categorization of actions, because I believe that once you start categorizing things into separate entities, the more you think about it, the more this category starts to blur. This is a discussion I had with my supervisors too, because what is pragmatic, what is epistemic? Because if you look at the Tetris study, they say that an epistemic action is an action in the external environment that benefits the internal mental computation, is a change in the external environment that benefits mental computation. But then what is the change? How do you assess this change? Is it the change with the self, or is it a change with the other? And to me, this kind of question I start to ask these questions, and the more I think about it, the more it becomes actually difficult to know what constitutes to be a pragmatic action. For a simple example, me going to turn on the light, I have a clear intention. It can be a pragmatic action, but it consists of small epistemic action, you know. So yeah, I just got lost in my own explanation.
Yeah. I think Dagmar, you had a question, and then this will be the last question for this panel.
Sorry, thank you very. Yeah, thank you very much for the presentation. I think it was also particularly aesthetically pleasing. So thank you very much for that. Really well laid out and narrated. I do apologize for my lens here. It seems to be just slightly blurry. I would like to maybe raise the question, and I think, it has been mentioned before, but also to bring it more towards the forefront of who the designer actually is. Because if we are looking at, for example, further transposition to adapted practice, then I think the designer could not only be the architect or the designer itself, but it could be the designer as the practitioner in relationship with consultants, in relationship with councils. So I think by moving forward from the designer of the Tetris game towards multiple designers of multiple games, you would basically open up the conversation even a bit more and could highlight within that conversation what the applicability for designers could be for your research.
Thank you. And I think obviously we realize we can talk about these. These are fascinating topics and we can spend a lot more time. Please use the chat for other suggestions and comments because we probably won't have enough time to get really in depth with each discussion. But thank you so much, Chitrash, and to all the questions. And we're going to now hear from a quick presentation from Adam Sebastian from Graz University of Technology.
Yes. Can I maybe share my screen with you? So I think it makes it a little bit easier. Can you see it?
Yes.
Okay. So obviously I did this whole presentation in 13 minutes. I'm trying to do it now in 3 minutes, but just in case I get lost in my thoughts, please interrupt me when those 3 minutes are over. But in general, my problem statement is kind of, which I think a lot of us know, that Grasshopper, Rhino, and all our CAD tools are great for solving technical or engineering problems, but I think they're not so well suited to solve kind of more creative or artistic tasks, especially those tasks which we have at the very beginning of a design, kind of the early stage design problems. And a lot of people have been looking into this, and kind of the long story short is that our current tools are based on inductive and deductive reasoning, which are very kind of, it's almost like reasoning like a mathematician would reason. And the argument is kind of that our tools should be based more in abductive reasoning, and which is based on experiences. And now you might ask yourself, what is abductive reasoning? And I think this here is a really good example. So the New York Times has this kind of game where they just show one image and no information, no title to the image. And you should kind of look at the image and use your experience and also your creativity to a certain degree to kind of obviously try to figure out what's happening in this image. So this is what abductive reasoning really is. It's not necessarily like a mathematical equation, but it's more from the stuff you have seen previously, and you kind of draw from those experiences. So here's just a very quick example, which is based on machine learning, what is kind of the overall theme for my PhD, for like a theoretical piece of software that would make sense to be adaptive or based in machine learning is, let's say you need a piece of software that can distinguish the images of cats and dogs. So either you could write a very complicated set of rules, how a cat looks or how a dog looks, and it would take a lot of time and would be probably not even work very well. Or you can implement machine learning, where pretty much all you do is just show the computer a lot of images of cats and dogs and tell the computer this is a cat and a dog. And after a while, the machine learning algorithm will figure out what is an image of a cat or a dog without any rule set. So my idea was to maybe adapt this principle to the idea of design. And the idea would be that I say a certain workflow, a certain way how a certain designer works. This is what I call an experience. And the idea would be to kind of do the same thing with the CAD and dot example, that I have different experiences, meaning different designs or different design scripts produced by multiple people. And you feed them into a machine learning algorithm, and you don't just feed the designs in, but you also feed in kind of some descriptions of the design. We would call them the label. And those can be things that are measurable, but also things that are not so easily measurable, like how much you like the aesthetic of an object. And from there on, there are two principles in machine learning that I would like to explore. One are generative tools, and one are style transferring tools. And they more or less do the same thing. They kind of try to discover novel designs based on the previously seen experiences. So in my paper and also in my long video, I talk about these three different concepts, and I give some insights why I think they could be useful in kind of retrieving new kind of design languages hidden between those experiences. To the very end, this is one of the early prototypes which I built this summer. So the idea was that I produced 15,000 different vases. And this is kind of where my PhD thesis kind of goes back to our original tools, because machine learning only works if you have a lot of data. So I propose to use our generative tools. For example, here I use Grasshopper to produce our experiences, because one experience is usually not enough. You need a lot of them. So I produced 15,000 vases, and I fed them in something which is called a variational autoencoder. And this is not a generative tool. Pretty much all I did is I compressed the whole geometry down into 5 numbers. And then I was able to manipulate those 5 numbers. And I kind of discovered vase geometry, which the computer has not seen before, kind of that light in between. And this is not necessarily so exciting, because I already had a Grasshopper script that kind of could produce the vases. However, what was really interesting afterwards, after analyzing my outputs, is that when I manipulated one of those 5 digits that represented my geometry, and by this represented or created new geometry, it seemed like this machine learning algorithm did not just learn how the geometry looked like, but also how the geometry was created. So it almost learned the Grasshopper script itself. And so that means that with machine learning, I'm not just able to learn how an object looks, but also what the deeper logic is, how this object was created in a sequential process. And my next step would be to obviously not do these type of things with just one experience, what I've done here, but use multiple experiences and get them all together into one machine learning kind of machine or script, and then kind of be able to combine those different experiences and curate very much of what the experience mixture is I'm kind of looking at to get novel design ideas out of that algorithm. So this was kind of my presentation in, I hope, 3 minutes.
Great, excellent. Just to remind everyone that we asked this the students to compress their dissertation topic into a 3-minute presentation, which is a kind of art in itself. And there are longer presentations on the website as well as posters. So please take time to look through those as well. I'm going to now turn to the respondents, Jane Scott and Federico Braida. And maybe we'll start with Jane because Federico just spoke. So,
hi, thank you. Just to start, Adam, really well done. Fabulous, fabulous presentation. I thought it was very convincing, and that you really articulated like the background and the approach very clearly, and a really interesting research topic. I kind of wanted to pick up where you left off really and try and dig a little bit more into your program of research, like the experimental process that you feel you're going to look into in the next, well, over your PhD. Kind of what are you going to do and what aren't you going to do within the research?
I mean, it's a little bit an open question, to be quite honest, but I think that's sometimes how research goes. Right now, and this is also the reason I kind of did this early experiment. What is currently happening is we have to be able to take geometry and be able to give it to a machine learning algorithm. So a lot of is just this. It's a lot of technical stuff. You know, how do we have to prepare the data so we can actually use it in this? I mean, it's kind of a black box if you use it, if you go into machine learning. That's what it is. So how can we feed this black box? How does our geometry have to look like? So you might have noticed that right now I'm working with voxels, which makes sense, especially from a standpoint of machine learning, because a lot of work that has been previously done is image-based. So going from an image to a voxel representation makes sense. On the other hand, it's not very efficient. You know, if you want to show more complex geometry or show more details. So this is what we're kind of working right now, is looking at methods of representing this with, you know, mesh representation going into voxels, and then afterwards would be implementing, you know, style transfer to those geometries. And then, you know, if you eventually end up at architecture, you get some really profound question, like what is the style and what is the content of a piece of geometry or a piece of architecture? You know, we as people, we can talk about this and we have those words, but in the end, it will be a mathematical algorithm that will kind of dissect those two things. And I think this could be also just a very interesting output just on that level, not like anything technical. How does an algorithm interpret the idea of architectural style? And I don't have an answer
and I think that was kind of my next question to pick up. There's kind of multiple aspects to your investigation, I would say, and you could take it in lots of different perspectives. And I wondered how you kind of felt you were going to test your data and analyze the results to kind of give you quite a, are you looking for kind of clarity, or are you looking to look across several different perspectives when you're coming up with some conclusions?
I mean, obviously I have to, after the data streamlining works a little bit more controllable, the next thing is kind of pick up on existing machine learning generative ideas, which are, again, so far mostly based on 2D, and then just see what is the most promising result towards, I mean, I would like to be this a tool that's based for 3D geometrical generation. This is where kind of my background lies in. And yes, on one hand, I keep it very broad, and this is so I still have all the options. So maybe I'm playing it safe, I'm not sure. Maybe it's also not a smart thing to do to be so broad at the beginning. But the idea is to pick out the one or two things that maybe in a year from now just seem the most promising. But
yeah, I mean, because I think it's really interesting to also think about the kind of broader significance of what you're trying to achieve, and almost how it's changing the designer's role, who the designer is in this process, what their input is, and kind of you talk about kind of experiences, but there's this whole like value as well, isn't there? That what the like a designer's values are and what that brings to the kind of the problem they're trying to address. So I think there's quite interesting broader aspects that you could pull out of this too.
Yeah, no, for sure. And again, I'm sure one small part of the PhD thesis will be a theoretical piece that deals with those questions. Yeah, for sure.
Great. Thank you. I'm going to now turn to Federico for his comments and question.
Okay, thank you. Dear Adam, Sebastian, thank you for your presentation. In my opinion, it was very clear. Congratulations on your research. You combine theory and practice in a good way. You make an important discussion, and your first prototype experience is very interesting. The discussion on machine learning is current, and it should involve different fields of knowledge. Designers and architect designers must join other professionals. Your research contributes to it. There are some points that I'd like to highlight now. First, you told us architects and designers often create their own custom tools for methods of scripting or visual programming languages. It is connected with thinking or the questions of meta design, even parametric design. It's a good point to discuss in your research. Next, you bring us a very important question. What is the style of the certain design or architecture work, and where runs the dividing line between content and style in architecture assembly? I think you won't answer this question with your research, but I invite you to think about authorship, plagiarism, and the pastiche. These topics should be considered when we are talking about design and architectural design. I'm mentioning these things because you told that with your tool, the designer could ask the algorithm to transform a geometry he or she has already created into the style of a certain design. You called style transfer. I agree with you. The ability of inject other designs experience into our own work at any stage of modeling makes machine learning-based design truly novel. It's very interesting to see you combine CAD and the parametric design tools with machine learning in your research. Then I have 3 questions for you. Have you already thought about the authorship, plagiarism, and the pastiche?
Should I answer the question right now, or do we?
Yes, you can. Yeah, no problem.
I have not thought about it. It's a really interesting question. Yes.
Okay, no problem.
No, it's again, yeah, no. I mean, you're right.
Just
and
to
obviously, with in general, with machines always making more, and not just in architecture, like in general, with machines just making more decisions nowadays, which could actually have legal repercussions. This is in general a question society has to start asking itself more and more: is if a machine makes a decision and the decision is not the right decision, whose fault is it? And it's the same thing. Yes, if I scan the design experiences of 10 different architects and use those 10 ideas to create an 11th architect, so to speak, who is the authorship of those things? I don't know. On the other hand, if I look at my students here in architectural school, they look at the work of other established architects all the time. That's what we tell them all to do. And, and not just current architects who are not alive anymore. And hopefully they get the best ideas out of that and combine it into something new. And I guess we also don't make them to attribute their inspiration. Sometimes they do. But yeah, I don't have an answer to that, unfortunately.
Okay. No problem, thank you. Just to think about it in the future. And you said the aim of your research is to explore and implement different machine learning algorithm techniques. Have you already done a prototype experiment? How many experiments do you intend to do? And the first prototype is about a vase design and object design. Do you intend to do another experiment involving a building design?
I mean, I'm always kind of building prototypes, and that's mostly to get more familiar just with how to do programming for machine learning. Obviously, the goal would be to do architectural designs. Yes. However, I like to start with something that's manageable. So there's a reason I started with making vases. A vase is it's a 360-degree rotation. It's a geometry that's can be easily described. It can be represented in voxels. So right now, those are more my consideration, which type of geometry is suitable, and let me also test out my theories. And unfortunately, architectural design is, from its complexity, higher up than little small manageable objects. And this is the reason I've not done anything that's can be found in the realm of architectural design. I hope that will happen at some point. Maybe it will not be a whole building. Maybe it could be something like, for example, different facade panels or panels from the ceiling, which could be in various styles. But you know, if those things would be eventually successful, then yes, you move along and always more into the space of building design. Yes.
I'm going to jump in right now and open it up for a few minutes of discussion, because again, we are running short on time. These are great questions and discussions. Is there anyone from the rest of the audience that would like to pick up on any of these questions or a new question?
I'd like to add something, if okay. Yeah, thanks, Adam. Great presentation and some thought-provoking questions here. My question would be about the role of mistakes. You know, you were saying that, yeah, standard architecture training involves a lot of copying. I say my students really try to be the second Frank Lloyd Wright, Frank Gehry, you name it. But they rarely get there, and they produce a lot of novelty on the way to trying to get there. And there's a lot of, you know, gray areas, mistakes, misunderstandings, and a lot of creativity that comes out of that. So when you put that in the context of machine learning, can you observe similar things?
I haven't observed them yet, but that's probably just because I'm rather at the beginning of the research. But yes, in theory, if there are mistakes in previously seen design, I think that's, or if things are combined in a way that both designs are not understand to the full extent, then mistakes are bound to happen. I'm pretty sure I will, in the next year, see a lot of very interesting and very unexpected design proposals or geometry that to a human observer, it's very clear this doesn't make any sense. But, you know, that's maybe also what makes this topic so exciting. But it also, if that makes everybody feel better about themselves, in the end, this means, yes, you still need a human kind of looking over the shoulder of the machine, right? I don't think anybody feels comfortable, at least yet, with just machines just doing design work, and we just say, well, I'm sure it will be great, right? So, but so far, I don't have any interesting stories regarding some big mistakes or misunderstandings, but I'm sure they will come up, and I will make sure I document them. Yes.
Thanks a lot, Adam.
Sure.
Maybe one more question.
Yeah, actually, I have one question about the authorship issue that Federico raised. And I think all the design fields now are facing the same problem in this area. If you look at the music composition generated by the algorithms, they have the same problem issue now. They are already not really the advanced compositions as human compositors do it, but it doesn't, I mean, the picture is very clear that it will be advanced, really. They will reach that point. Maybe they will go above that point. I'm not sure how they will distinguish what is human, what is the machine in the coming century. But the same thing about the architects as well. I think this is the common problem of the all design related fields is art AI coming more into playing into game and is advancing. How we will make that differentiation? What do you think that how the human factor will play a role in this in the future?
I mean, this is such a deep question. I'm not sure if I'm the right person to answer it, but what at least I can see, if I just zoom in on my work and on our field, or at least on this type of project, is that the architect has to, if you intend to use those tools, the architect becomes a little bit like a curator. So it would be still up to us to kind of first choose which experiences or which design are shown to the algorithm in order to create this tool. And again, there's no reason you could have not have 20 different tools, and all how the tools are shaped is what experiences you have shown the algorithm. So that would be one way how the architect is very much driving the design by curating experiences. The second is by kind of mixing the different experiences after the machine learning algorithm has understood those experiences, by kind of, saying what is your input, towards what style you want to morph a geometry, or towards what multiple styles you want to morph a geometry, and how much you want this morph to happen. You can almost see it a little bit like cooking. You want 20% from this ingredient, 10% from this ingredient, minus 15% from this style. So these are kind of the two roles how I see the designer in this type of machine learning based workflow.
Great. That's a great analogy. And I think that's something that we'll probably be discussing with other presentations as well, in this question of authorship as machine learning becomes much more prevalent and widespread. I'm going to now, we're going to move on, and we will be able to have a general discussion at the end of the sessions. So we're going to move on and invite Alberto Fernandez Gonzalez from UCL Bartlett to do his 3-minute presentation of his dissertation.
I have a short presentation in Keynote, so maybe I must share my screen as well, like Adam. Let's see. Yes, I think this will work. Let's see. Share is here. Yeah, it's online. Yes. Yeah,
it's okay.
Perfect. So, well, my name is Alberto Fernandez, a PhD student of the Bartlett School of Architecture and a Master of Architecture as well from the same school. And I'm from Chile as an architect practitioner. My research, cellular architecture from discrete bits to a high resolution space, is supervised by Professor Mario Capo and Roberto Boltassi from the Bartlett School of Architecture. What is cellular architecture? It's a theoretical and design research to explore the CA simulations for new ways to develop architecture as a growing top-down architecture versus the classic methods. So in some way, as you can see in this image, I'm simulating the different ways to apply this CA from bottom to up, trying to understand what is, from one hand, a theoretical approach from discrete grids to a more design approach, which is high resolution space. In this diagram, I want to show you in some way these two approaches in the same research. The theoretical one, trying to build a framework for this CA approach, and the high resolution space, the design one, want to explore and analyze more of the perceptual way of these simulations. And at the end, I want to merge these both approaches, trying to build at the end of this process a design theory that could be applied for architectural field. So for that purpose, in this research, I'm seeking and I'm testing several different CA families. I'm starting with Langton Ant, which is one of them using now, as generator seed that can create and translate from images at 3D-dimensional spaces. As well, I'm using this same coding methodology to translate 2D to 3D patterns as a restriction from the real world to the digital world, using the CAAD approach from John Boynome from 1941, the beginning of all this process. So from theoretical to design approach means that this research expands the automata theory to the architectural field, recognizing the theoretical background of this branch of computer science. Using this seed cell called automaton as main original resources from a 2D to a 3D final approach over a discrete field. At the same time, I'm working in a non-linear CA history approach, which is reconstructing the three main branches: a mathematical one, a machine one, which is such a kind of machine approach and the architectural and urban design approach as well. The reason why is quite simple, because this is not new. This is starting from the 40s till now, crossing different ages, and such an example, 60s with Price, Friedman, Fraser, and others, and then as well in the 90s with Batty, Coates, and Fraser as well. And now we are working with a more discrete architectural approach, which is trying to reinterpret the very best of all this huge knowledge that we have from this history. So this research starts with the problematic of crystal growing simulations, trying to recognize rules that functions as a mediator between cells, states, and space, creating from simple rules, 2D ones to 3D ones, a complex and quite diverse result, just changing this simulated universe at the end. So at the same time, I'm reinterpreting this collection of points coming from this idea in a discrete and a continuous way as well, trying to enrich the final result as a perceptual architectural approximation towards a final construction of a system who creates complexity and simplicity at the end, because the discrete approach is from simple elements, but at the same time, this continuous approach is translating the simple one in a more richer one or a high resolution one. So cellular architecture can redefine how architecture and context are both related, is one of my questions. Well, in that sense, architectural space can evolve from an initial space as a living organism. So reading, learning, and applying context growing from new input to a self-replicating logic. In that way, the final result consists in a high dense collection of points that can be translated in different ways, as you can see here in these 3D printed models, trying to insist to create a newer perception of a high resolution perception from these discrete grids. So I'm testing at the same time this code emerging from processing to grasshopper to rhinoceros, and then I'm translating this geometry to BIM platforms, trying to test it in a such a kind of architectural approach using radial simulations and wind tunnels and any other forces that probably we are using in our architectural field. And at the same time, we have this.
You could wrap up soon,
yeah.
Alberto. That would be great.
I'm finishing now. So at the end, these results can be, as you can see, discrete or highly dense. And I'm still translating the complexity from this collection of points to such a kind of continuous geometries. So my aim is this, and to create a different typology in architecture. So this is probably my hypothesis, which is at the end is a design approach that can learn from contextual data from itself during the beginning of the end of the generative process, delivering answers about coherence inside outside this architectural proposal, crossing scales in a highly coherent, dense way from discrete to continuous geometries. So my references, and thank you very much.
Thank you.
It's complicated. This in 3 minutes.
Yes, no, this is it's good practice for being concise with a dissertation, which is never a concise thing.
Yes.
So I'm going to invite the discussants, Dagmar Reinhardt, and I have to see who the second discussant is, but Dagmar, why don't we start with you and your question?
Yeah, yes, thank you, Kathy. Thank you, everybody here, and a warm welcome from Sydney, where we are just beyond midnight. So forgive me if my words start to stumble. But can I just say, Alberto, thank you for your presentation and also for the poster and the movie that you have made. I think it's been a fabulous and very explicit, aesthetically extremely pleasing proposal for what I understand is almost a utopian architecture that you are endeavoring to undertake. And so if you don't mind me, I have 4 or 5 points that I would like to bring up as a sort of proposition, or maybe sort of segues into other ways of thinking about it. So if I'm looking at your research, to me, that's a utopia of discrete spaces. where the question is really how do we move from an architecture of tectonics almost to an architecture of fiber? And how can we organize this fiber, and in which way can we then adapt that for architecture? So the second point would be sort of by establishing these complex systems for digital design, what you're proposing by pathway of either cellular data that come from something that could be the block or could be situated within the Cartesian grid towards something that then follows the pathway or a trajectory. Are we really leaving that Cartesian grid behind? Or is it still remnants in the way that these cellular data are set up? So that would be a second provocation. A third provocation to me would be, and I've been following Jill Retson and his work quite closely because I think it's actually quite fabulous. And with Jill Retson, this idea of cellular automata runs very drastically into a space of fabrication and of materiality. So, I think the material that you have showcased is so progressive because I don't quite know if it's a fabrication exercise or if it's a rendering or if it's a speculation or if it already has received some material information. But I would be really interested to see what your thinking is in terms of depositing matter within sort of those structures. As a fourth provocation, I do have, and this is me talking not as an educator but more as a researcher, but more as a practitioner. How do you think that these cellular structures can actually be applied towards architecture? Because you said something about scalelessness or crossing scales. Whereas in architecture, at some moment, if we don't talk about the grotto, we do have to apply a certain way of scale by means of the human body. So I'm really interested to understand that as well. And then maybe leading off with the main questions, and we can start then having a discussion about that. Will you take this into, as part of your PhD, will you take this into prototypes and demonstrators in order to then investigate materials or scale, or will you talk it, or in which way will you define frameworks and criteria in order to limit further applicability? Because I think you're developing a super attractive design system, but you can play this game endlessly. And I mean, of course, that would be a PhD in itself, but I would really be quite curious because you are a practitioner. Yeah. So in a way you have that thinking frame. If what your approach is to cut that research further down, because unfortunately a PhD only allows us to play for 3 years. And then at some moment we need to move over towards, you know, hopefully having completed a good PhD, then moving towards grants and funded research.
Yes. Well, I will start quite briefly with the first one. It's how I'm in some way playing with this discrete coordinate, this discrete universe, and then I'm translating that in this kind of fiber universe. So this is in some ways linked with the second one, because at the end, this is a reinterpretation of this collection of points who emerge from this bottom-up approach. So it's something simple and logical at the same time. I'm storing this or saving this collection of points from the very beginning to the end of this generation. So I have coordinates from point 0 to the point 3000, and I'm just threading the initial point to the last point, crossing all the coordinates who are emerging in this collection of points, such a kind of historical manifestation of this match or in some way. So for that reason, it's such a kind of visualization of the behavior behind this cellular growing, in more than just adding blocks. It's just threading the history behind this, and this is what a nice. I think it's not complicated, because at the end, if you want to jump to the third approach, which is the materiality, is possible in some way to thread the same idea in the real world, following these coordinates, which is the first point, the second point, the third one, the fourth one, threading this in just a kind of form or maybe with other real material, and then it's really possible to replace this point with real element, 3D printed maybe, or fabricated in a handmade way as well. It's because at the end I'm just following just steps, following coordinates, and then I'm replacing this coordinate with real element. That is the final approach in some way, trying to find in a step with the last one, the step with prototypes, a real applicability of this technique or this design theory. Because I'm seriously thinking over this process that this not need to be necessarily purely digital in terms of to the beginning to the end, because at the end, if you want to replicate this in the real world, probably we need to create just a kind of hybridation in terms of, okay, I have this collection of elements, I have this collection of coordinates, and then I must just replace coordinates with elements, and then this final result emerge. So for that, in that sense, sometimes I'm just wondering if it's the application maybe could be more related with such a kind of public space instead just classical private buildings or facilities. So I'm dealing with that. With that, I cross these 5 points in different ways, but it's quite complicated because as you explained it, probably this is a research without end. So I need to apply few restrictions, and maybe the restrictions are coming with materiality, how it's possible to fabricate this, and on the other hand, the scale of this approach. In my case, 3D simulations, I'm using grids with 15 to 15 centimeters, so trying to reach such a kind of a handmade block or handmade something. Mm-hmm.
Great.
But would you take it more towards structure or more towards infrastructure? Like if you have to choose between two, is it structure or infrastructure? Because that would be immediately like a different scale, right? So if you can only have one, which one would it be?
Yeah, right now I think it's more structure than infrastructure for the scale, because it's for I'm working with 15 by 15 by 15. So with that, I can achieve a huge spans. So I'm just in some ways a public space, but such a kind of a neighborhood, some with square in between or space in between, something like that. Playing with existing infrastructure more than trying to create something from scratch.
Great. I'm going to now turn to Dr. Jose Pinto Duarte for his question.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you very much for the invitation to be a part of this magnificent event. So Alberto, thank you so much for your presentation and for your work. I'm going to make some comments and I'm going to play the role of the devil's advocate. Not because I'm a skeptical, but because I need to be convinced, and you have not convinced me yet. This is not to say that I'm not possible to be convinced. So I think this is a case in which you start with a tool, and they are trying to find a useful, application of the tool. Your presentation showed beautiful images, very captivating, and there's no question about the aesthetic value of the work that you produced, but I don't think it's architecture yet. It might be painting, it might be sculpture, but not architecture. So my questions go in the direction of trying to bring this into the realm of architecture. So I think you need to define the problem that we're trying to solve beyond the one of finding what can be done in architecture with this tool. Okay, so I think it will be of a great help for you if you find a case study and try to apply this method in the solution or in developing an approach to that case study. So some suggestions in that direction. I think you need to define what the cell corresponds to. Okay, you need to address the issue of meaning. What's the meaning of a cell? Okay, so I think this is very important. You talk about these rules, and they'll talk about simulation. And let me give you another example. So you can use your rules to generate candidate solutions. And then you can use simulation to filter out or filter in the solutions that are bad or good, meaning they are more, they're closer to a solution to a problem that you define or not. I think this is a possibility, one direction that you could go into. And then is also the issue of interpretation. So once you define what's the meaning of a cell, you need also to find what are rules for interpreting the different configurations. As you say, you can have a set of points, but can connect the points in different ways, and therefore end up with different, possible designs. So I think, defining the rules for interpreting is also very, very important. So let me find some, give you another thing to think about. You probably are familiar with the voyages of Gulliver, right? The Lilliput, the wise man trying to come up with an essay by randomly playing with words. So I'm afraid if you don't define a framework that's, in a more precise way, you'll be, playing the role of the wise man from Lilliput, endlessly trying to combine, using rules to generate an essay, but never achieving an essay because meaning is not there. So I think it's crucial from my viewpoint, I think it's crucial for you to address, the issue of meaning. Okay. And then we could talk about, do you really think that architecture evolves in this way? Where are you extracting the rules from? How are you coming up with the rules? You could always say, okay, I don't want to have phenomenological equivalence. I want to have functional equivalence. What I mean is, I'm not trying to simulate an existing process. I'm trying to create a new process. And it's fine as long as I achieve a useful result. Okay, so these are my comments. And I would like to hear you a little bit about some of these comments.
Mm-hmm. Yes, okay. Thank you for your comments, because at the same time are my comments in my mind, because you are right in several of these points, because it's the challenge that I'm crossing during this PhD adventure. As you pointed, this exactly this emerged as a digital design tool that is coming from an historical approach from this mathematical universe, and gradually all this knowledge is related with the architectural history from 60s till now. So in that sense, I'm still wondering if this is which kind of architectural manifestation is this one, because it belongs in some way to the discrete architectural field, but at the same time belongs to probably with belongs to the heritage from metabolism movements, or belongs to as well to this approximation of from the 90s from urban simulation as well, related with how with that we can create architecture from data to real projects, or understanding a real architecture and translated that in these cellular architectural analytic tools. So in that sense, I'm just dealing with this, which is probably is good to point here. I'm dealing with the problem of lack of detail in the architectural development right now, because we crossed the history of architecture from a highly rich historical approach with this with a lot of details pre-modern modern movement. But then from the modernist movement, we erased almost all the possibility to have such a kind of detail in our architecture. And then we crossed different other movements like postmodernism and deconstructivism and etc. Right now we cross parametricism, and then we are in this other digital environment with different branches, including this post parametricism approach, which in some way probably this idea belongs to that, because it's such a kind of approach with more organical level at the same time, more than just trying to add a pure, I insist, modernistic, quite clear space. So in that sense, I like this suggestion that you put here in this discussion, because what is the real meaning of this cell that I'm designing? What I'm doing with this, which is the reinterpretation that this digital element is developing from the data from the real environment. That is the key of everything. Right now, I'm not sure which is the real meaning of this cell, because I'm still working on that. But I'm working with these simulations, trying to understand that this cell can read radiation maps, for instance, from a real context. This cell can read exactly solids or versus air, and it can measure in some way distance between two solid points. So at the same time, in some way, training these cells, this cellular approach has been possible for me till now to create a architecture in terms of, okay, I can recognize a structure, I can recognize such a kind of functions, circulations, spans, or structures, or solar radiation, on any other element properly related with the architectural field. But I'm still wondering if this is just such a kind of a structural approach, or it could be a perceptual approach, such a kind of emotions behind the final result. If I can train these cells in more a kind of creative way instead just functional way. So I'm dealing with this idea with rules, and I'm working with that. So at the end, probably this is one of the challenges that I'm crossing, because I need to restrict my research in few limits, and probably these limits are mainly coming from this part of the architecture, this part of the reality, and how this reality is translated in this digital universe. But with this restriction, I insist a structure, functions, circulations, not more than just playing in a game field, because this is not a game. At the end, these building blocks must.
Alberto, I'm going to jump in a little bit because we're very short on time, and
I think I enjoyed the questions. This is. Comments.
And perhaps this is a great aspect of this workshop, because perhaps we can make connections and continue conversations even after this. But maybe just if there's, I'd like to still allow one more question from anyone else in the audience, or comment, with a reminder to kind of keep this short, because we do have 2 more presenters and we want to have time for a discussion. And as I've been reminded, we do expect to go about 20 to 30 minutes over time. So we are, so please, but I just want to make sure to get to the others. But is there another question or comment for Alberto? Okay. Okay, well, I think in the interest of time, we will move on, and I think there's a lot to talk about with this dissertation topic. So the next presenter I'm going to call on is Igor Laqua from the University of Porto, who will make his 3-minute presentation.
Okay, thank you, Kathy. First of all, I would like to thank for this selection to be here today with you. It's a great honor for me. I'm speaking from Brazil right now. I'm from Brazil, but I'm enrolled at the PhD program from Faculty of Architecture of the University of Porto, where I recently approved a PhD proposal. And my PhD proposal focuses on architect Nuno Porta's theory of evolutionary housing, which is quite interesting because he linked computational technologies with sociological data in order to respond and solve social housing design. And although he's an important figure in Portugal, I see that he's still a bit unknown worldwide. So I would like to share a little bit my presentation here so you could see him and maybe get in touch. his figure. So this is the title of my PhD thesis, Dwelling Technology, Adaptive Design and Building System for Low-Cost Housing in Portugal. And this is Nuno Portas, which is a great architect, Portuguese architect, received an Abercrombie prize from União Internacional des Architectes, and which was a prize that Giancarlo De Carlo and Ian Gale and Lúcio Costa received before him. So I think the basis of my research is to continue his work and to think his work through digital technologies and digital fabrication, parametric design. And well, the main idea of his research is based on social housing design. He developed a methodology of it. So he tested this methodology in the 60s. And he says, his own words says that during the 60s, they developed an AI technology to solve these kinds of design problems. So the idea is to basically figure it out the way they treated this methodology at the 60s and continue this with an approach that can continue this work, which is basically a survey methodology with yes or no questions to the inhabitants that we received, like a benefit from the government, right? So, well, the main question of my research is how to do this, right? Because, well, since these technologies and this methodology was developed like a long time ago, and the problem of homelessness and affordable housing still persists, especially in the Portuguese context. So my idea is it's how it could be done, how this update of his theories and his methodologies could be done. And I have a special focus on the update, on the sociological theory update. His background, Nuno Portas' background is Schomburg Deleuze's theories. And I'm aware that there are lots of sociological updates from this point of view about the evolutionary housing. So my main question is to understand how this could be done, how to understand family structure today, and how to apply it in contemporary context. So that's basically it. Thank you,
Igor. We'll now turn to the respondents, and we'll start with Huda Salman, and then Dagmar Reinhardt will speak. Huda.
Thank you. Yes, we are pleased also to have you, Igor, with us today for this magnificent event. I'm really happy that you are reviving the legacy of Portas as well in terms of the social housing and its relation to sociological data, and how you could apply the same methodologies that he has developed using digital fabrication and also parametric design. It's really genuine in the intent of the research. However, I have a few points to make. I know that probably you are at the early stage of your research and it's only a proposal at the moment. But for instance, within the thesis of Portas, we have two main terms. We have the transition space and the extensions of the dwelling. So is your focus on the same two concepts? And because by doing so, I think the transferring the design process to a ground for experimentation and verification of ideas would be very easy for you because you understand those concepts already. And all you can do now is to maybe apply them with the most recent technologies and how you're going to go about it. So my question would be, it's already a methodology of, experimentation. How could you apply this using parametric design on prefabrication?
Well, I really think that it's not that easy at all.
Yeah.
I'm figuring out a way to understand better the methodology they developed at the 60s. I'm trying to have an interview with one of the characters that work with Nuno Portas, which is architect Alexandre Alves Costa. And he actually did an internship at the National Laboratory of Civil Engineering of Lisbon. Yeah. And I'm trying to understand it, right? It may sound easy. It may sound like, how can I say, already established process, but not at all. It's like, I have like lots of work to better understand it. So, and yes, there are like, Nuno Portas developed a lot of concepts. And besides these two that you mentioned, there are like others that I think it's really important, especially his methodology for social housing, which deals with the exterior space and functional spaces, interior spaces. And for them, the main question was to understand the needs of the inhabitants, right? Not only the relationship with the house and the urbanism. So the main question was to respond like in a better fashion, how the inhabitants would like better fit these houses, right? So the inquiries they did was kind of like 300 questions, yes or no questions, kind of like, oh, do you want a connection between a room and a kitchen? Do you want an exterior space attached to your room, and so on? So my expectation is to make this kind of technology that was like really far away from the architect universe back in the 60s, more close to the practice and to the profession, to the student who needs or who want to develop this evolutionary housing theory. So yeah, maybe I
yeah, that's excellent. I mean, you have a very strong methodological stance that you have to consider carefully. But at the same time, if you think of the methodology and the methods you're going to use, are you planning to use the same survey or adapt the same survey and then make a comparison between the data, the sociological data you're going to get?
For the instance, yes, because I think that if I simulate what they did back in the 60s, I'll have like lots of answers to how to proceed with nowadays needs from the inhabitants. For instance, the family structure has totally changed, right? So there are other needs, there are other difficulties that the architect have to deal. So I think maybe at the end of the research, me together with my advisors, we'll figure out a tool to better fit like evolutionary housing in everyday practice. So that's it.
Excellent.
I'm going to turn thank you. Yes, thank you for these questions, Huda. And I'm going to turn the questions over to Dagmar. And
yeah, thank you. Thank you, Kathy. Thank you, Igor, for the presentation. I think we've said congratulations to some people for having undertaken a pathway and already having developed a body of research. I would like to say congratulations to a super relevant theme, and obviously to a super relevant hero whom you personally and emotionally engage with. I think having a really good problem at the beginning of a PhD research, or something that really drives and motorizes you, is really quite critical. So I think you have really made a good pathway with that. Now, taking that sort of forward, so you have your superhero, and then the question is basically, what do you do with the body of work of that superhero? And I think this is where I think you, in a way, you're in the first period of the PhD, you'll try to do your tests and do some trials and some surveys and some evaluations and, you know, sort of archival research as well, in order to establish a bandwidth of what your research could potentially be. And then you make a selection with your supervisors, not at the very end of it, but somewhere normally after a year, where you want to intensify and drive it towards two. And to me, it feels like you're beginning that phase of understanding where you want to take it a little bit better. So I think that's really important, because it can very easily become just an architectural history research, which is quite obviously not what you want. So that's the one thing. But it will form a part of it, because I think the socialist agenda is one of the key drivers that you do have. And to that extent, I would sort of assume that you would look at Aldo van Eyck and of course Herman Hertzberger and you know, sort of other social. Netherlands has quite a huge range in that regard. Then the second thing that I'm telling my PhD students most of the time is, in order to get the Buffett on board, you can do like a research triangulation, like a Venn diagram, where you really take yourself through the topics that you find interesting. So what I understood was the idea of prefabrication, including robotics, because that's set in your movie, just as a sort of cameo icon. But I think that's to me, a clear indication that you want to actually develop fabrication strategies and methodologies. That needs to be inbuilt there. Then you have the question of sustainability, which I think is also somewhere embedded in there. And you named homelessness. Yeah, so it's not your classical family structure, but it would also be, you know, everybody else who doesn't. And then we are going to like a socialist agenda or redistribution of space as a property of a community. And I think that, and I know this is not computation, but I'm quite a believer that computation and or the work that we're doing here is really, it's a foundation of producing humanism, right? So it's not only moving through softwares, but it's really, what do these novel technologies help us to do that we couldn't do otherwise? And so I think this is something that you can quite clearly bring forward. And then maybe the last point is also, you may have started that research, but we're now we're entering the second year of COVID. And so nothing is the same. So even socialist structures like in the 1960s, that will require different understandings of social distancing, of communities, of community that may be with different family structures. And so that's another part that would need to plug into the Venn diagram. But then I think, you know, the idea of robotics as an infill structure, for example, to some of the stuff that Alison and Peter Smithen have been producing. Yeah, and then this whole understanding of, is that then bespoke or is it customized? And in which way does that fit with the user profile, which is located to or you know, connected to other user profiles as within COVID circumstances? It's a fantastic field that you can potentially you know, sort of unfold for yourself.
Oh, thank you so much for your contribution. It was amazing. And actually, me and my advisors, we've been struggling a lot with this, because how to figure it out, a constructive system that could fit it all. So we've been talking about concrete, and I did the presentation at CAAD with a lot of criticism about it. So they asked me to consider like timber structures or like more sustainable materials. So we're at the very beginning of the research, so we're still like trying to solve this, right? Trying to figure it out a way to better fit these constructive systems, right? So it could be sustainable, so it could meet like the inhabitants' needs. And another thing that you mentioned is like the historical background, right? For me, I did like a intense 1 year research because truly I didn't know about the Nunoportas before, not as deep as I know now. And FAUP like really like give me all the information that I need to get on track of this character with Nunoportas. And I'm working really hard to move forward this historical study and start as soon as possible like the experimental phase, which is going to be like the creation of this system through parametric design, through robotics and everything that we could like better use for solve this problem.
Igor,
I actually oh, sorry.
I'm going to try to open it up to the audience. We're running out of time. Okay. And just to see if there's any other suggestions or questions to add to the discussion. Okay. Okay, are there any final comments before we move on to our last presenter?
Kathy, may I make a suggestion to Igor?
Oh,
yes.
Please.
Igor, you may want to see my PhD thesis just because. Yeah, okay. Because one part of it deals with the system that Nunoportas developed, and trying to create, a system to come up with housing requirements. Basically, he studied very carefully how people lived in, how people use inhabitable spaces, and in that you can use that on many different ways. One of them is to come up with the requirements for housing solutions. Feel free to contact me if you have any questions. Okay.
Oh, thank you so much, Professor José Pinto. Thank you so much.
Fantastic. So we have one more presentation, which, and we will be going to probably half an hour over time. So hopefully all of you can stick around for the discussion, the general discussion. So our final presenter today is Rasha Sukuri from Beirut Arab University, where she is doing her dissertation.
Hello, hi, I'm Rasha. If I may share my screen. Okay. So I'm going to talk about my research, which is entitled Generative Design through Agent-Based Systems, a new methodology integrating alternative materials, fabrication, and construction techniques in the design process. So when we talk about the construction industry, we cannot but mention about the contribution of how it contributes to 40% of the greenhouse gas emissions. So by 2050, the Earth population will exceed 9 billion people, which means that if we continue to perform at the current rate, this will contribute to the use of 60 million tons of materials every year, which is almost 10 Beirut cities every month, which is where I come from. So in current design methodologies, architects are challenged to predict all present and future design requirements and possible alterations for buildings prior to their construction. Accordingly, they attempt to resolve matters in a single solution. This solution may not always be capable of responding to continuing drastic population growth and environmental considerations. Innovations in form-finding strategies such as generative design and search for flexibility and adaptability has widened the scope of solutions to architectural problems. However, current design strategies are rarely capable of efficiently utilizing the rapidly expanding technological possibilities when constructing. For John Fraser, for instance, who has been inspired, among others, by the concept of complexity theory and self-organization, He highlights the importance of drawing inspiration from nature and its inner logic. In contrast to the built environment, natural ecosystems have complex biological structures whereby they recycle their materials, permit change and adaptation, and make efficient use of ambient energy. The concept of morphoecologies, for instance, has been described by optimization in general and generative design approach, where it integrates material and structural performance with environmental conditions, assembly and manufacturing logics, and the intention of functionally exhibiting internal environmental balance, such as that of the termite bond. Within the depleting resources and the urban settings, the desire to be able to accommodate new needs will increase demand for more adaptable buildings that can be efficiently executed. This research proposes a hybrid model that integrates material fabrication systems and construction technologies or techniques into the architectural process for complex models. Briefly, the methodology that I've been trying to experiment with is, first of all, reviewing current methods and literature review of generative design for complex architecture components. Second, suggest a hybrid model that provides an efficient strategy for designing and building generative architecture. And third, assessing the proposed model through case studies, comparative analysis between the current architecture process and the proposed one. I intend to have a checklist for optimizing the model, taking into consideration material fabrication and construction techniques for energy efficiency evaluation. Thank you.
Great, thank you. We're going to have, we're gonna start with the response and questions from Jane Scott. And then I think, Dietmar, you're going to be also asking the questions. So Jane, why don't you start?
Hi, Rasha, lovely to meet you.
Hi, thank you.
Just to start with, I really like the way you set up your research. I think it's really, really timely and critical theme that you're exploring. And I think it's nice that you kind of position it so clearly. I guess for me, what I would really like you to share a bit more is kind of how you're going to develop the methodology, kind of what is, how the variables seem so big at the moment.
Yeah.
Have you got a way of kind of pulling them in and specifying it a bit more clearly?
Yeah. Should I answer now?
Yeah.
Yeah. So for me, that was the first issue that I've been trying to struggle, or I've been struggling with. But I would like to contextualize it a bit more because I think this can be discussed in China or in Lebanon or anywhere else, but contextualizing it might make it a bit more framed, let's say, and in particular discussing or focusing on particular materials, particular construction techniques, and so on. So maybe when I focus on that, when I frame it in that matter, maybe I would come up with a methodology to test this hybrid model that I speculate. I also intend on discussing, so the first thing is that I say there's a hybrid model, but I base it on existing researchers trying to apply this model. So there are certain researchers or architects currently trying to apply this model, such as Jenny Sabin or Fabian Scheurer, who are trying to integrate the material technology and fabrication techniques within their generative design process. So maybe interviewing these people and trying to understand how do they, like their design process, how do they try to come up with these complex designs efficiently. That's another way of addressing the current model.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting. And I wondered whether, because I guess what I understand from your research is that rather than looking at these kind of individual design solutions or design experiments, what you want to do is kind of produce this methodology that could be applicable in for different scenarios. And yes, maybe it's kind of a local context driven response, but maybe it's got also much broader applications. So I think that was kind of my initial response, was it'd be very interesting to kind of have a really in-depth look at some of those practitioners like Jenny Sabin, as you highlighted, maybe Akin Menges and his work with like material computation as well. Yes, I thought that was really interesting. I guess from my perspective, so I'm a researcher in the Hub for Biotechnology in the built environment. So what we're doing is we're really looking at kind of new material systems where rather than using passive materials, actually we're using kind of biological materials to be agents within an architectural system. And I'm wondering whether you're thinking within your research of looking at kind of novel and maybe biomaterials as well as conventional material systems.
Oh yeah. The intention is to experiment with new or novel material technologies, because I mean, using existing materials, I think there's a lot of research on that. So what if we try to mimic nature also with the actual materials, the materials of nature, like natural, including organic materials within mixtures, or I've already been trying to test in concrete mixtures, introducing additives to make it stronger and including organic waste. So that's a current testing strategy I've been trying to explore, and maybe see how it affects the performance of the material itself and how we can learn from that, and how it maybe impacts the design process itself.
Yeah,
go ahead.
Sorry, I was just going to say maybe we could follow up with that if you wanted, because within
absolutely.
we've got people
That would be
working
great.
with self-healing materials, and yeah, that'd be really nice to follow up.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
I'm going to now turn the discussion over to Dr. Dietmar Koring.
Yeah, thank you for the wonderful presentation, and yeah, also to the first question what Jane just said, because I think it's quite important, as you talk already in your title about a new methodology. And I was just wondering, I mean, maybe you need to be a little bit more concrete. What's really new in this methodology? Is it this hybrid model you're talking about, or what kind of approach do you take to name it as a new model or methodology? Can you refer to that a bit?
Yeah, I mean, the way I framed it is that currently there's some sort of separation between the design and build methods, or maybe not currently, up until lately. And there are new practitioners who are trying to introduce the material technology and fabrication techniques within their design process. So this novel strategy that I'm proposing, it tries to introduce these new material techniques and advanced fabrication strategies in order to have an efficient, like that's the intention, to have an efficient design process. The intention, and that's why I started my research with the whole problem in architecture right now, is that the intensive use of materials and the energy expenditure that is being rarely taken into consideration. So the novel part is the introduction of new materials, new fabrication techniques, in the intention of having a very efficient fabrication and design build process.
Okay, so it's more about the human interaction and participatory process in the design process, or are we talking about an algorithm you would like to develop? Because at the moment you're showing wonderful physical models and that stuff, and on the other hand you're talking about an agent-based system. So are you linking this agent-based system directly to the human being, or is it a kind of algorithm which you would like to develop? Because otherwise I would like to ask you, I mean, what kind of rules do these agent-based models have in your process?
Yeah, so that was one of my first questions actually. And the intention was to introduce an algorithm, to have this algorithm that is just like a formula that introduces these parameters, let's say, within the design process. However, and I've been trying to read more into the methodology, the research methodology. And I think introducing the aspect of the human, as you said, and how to have the researcher and the users taking part in this process, maybe something I would like to explore. And currently I don't have like a vision to the outcome of this research. Maybe it will happen along while I keep on exploring. So yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you're tackling kind of wicked problem here. It's very highly discussed. I think the problem is if you develop an algorithm, you know, like also, for example, Adam is doing, how do you develop trust for the user? So this links to the actual discussion of AI and having trust in AI. So maybe how do you show an algorithm and the process of the algorithm that we can trust the result? Maybe it's also an open discussion for everybody. It's actually a difficult question.
Yeah, yeah. So yeah, and it's a question of agency as well, and how to address that that matter. Yeah, I think I need to research about that. Yeah.
Yeah, but overall I really like it. And last point from my side is really short. I mean, in one of your in your expose, you're showing a zebra, right? That system is probably called reaction diffusion model.
Yeah.
Not sure if you heard about that, and you can
download
for Houdini and that stuff. So I mean, if you nail it down, certain stuff is there already. But you can send always an email to me, and I'll give you some links to the software.
Sure. Thank you. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Great work.
Thank you.
Excellent. I'm going to open this up to to any other questions or comments from the rest of the audience, and after we have a discussion, you know, a brief discussion about Rasha's work. Koray will describe, we will be voting on best presentation today. And then we'll also have an open discussion for, you know, across the panelists to see if we can start a kind of broader conversation across topics. Is there anyone from the audience that would like to make a comment or add anything to the discussion around Rasha's project? Jane or Dietmar, do you have any other comments?
Well, I mean, Jane, you want to go first? Otherwise, I just have one point. You're talking about environmental conditions, and there maybe you link it a little bit more to the human being. You said that already, right? While we are talking, but it's missing somehow in your presentation. And there was you also include ethics, you know, something you need to address somehow.
Yeah.
And the other point is, I said, methodology, be clear. I mean, what you're using, what's new, what's novel, so it's understandable. And that right in the beginning in your abstract, so.
Okay. All right, thanks.
Super. This has been a fascinating set of presentations, and thank you all to all of the students for compressing what I know are unruly topics that are still in formation into a really concise presentation that I'm sure you know, covers only a fraction of all the things that you're thinking about and struggling with. And again, thank you to all of our panelists and respondents for the really provocative comments, advice. I've loved. I love seeing what's coming up in the chat and all the discussions and discussions that will surely keep going after this workshop. We're going to have what we'd like to do is also have at the end of this an award for the best presentation. And so before we go into a kind of more open-ended discussion, I think we'd like to do this this voting, which Koray, you're going to explain the voting, or Birgo, will you explain?
I will
okay,
explain.
We'll explain it before we lose people, because I know that people also have other commitments. And so maybe Koray, you can explain the voting.
Yeah, sure. Right now, I'm just copying a link at the chat below, and I'm also copying that chat to the live stream as well. So we will have an audience participating as well today. When you enter the link, you will see ranking, which you may just rank the 5 papers amongst themselves in your preference. Then we will just have the results, but we will not share it today with you. At the end of these 3 days, we will aggregate them, and then the panelists will decide on the winning presentation.
Okay, so we're going to have give a few minutes for people to put in their rankings, and in the meantime, what I'd like to do is just kind of open up, a general discussion. Obviously, we ran out of time with a lot of these, and there's so many fascinating topics to discuss. It was interesting that we titled this session Fabrication and Construction Techniques in the Design Process. And as, Generative Design and Digital Tools. Sorry, I was reading the end of Rasha's presentation. So we titled this session Generative Design and Digital Tools. And really, all of these topics brought up multiple questions around generative design, as well as design tools, as well as questions that came up a number of times were questions of the agency of the designer, how that agency is understood, how that agency is shared between the design tool and the process, as well as how, as a researcher, one frames this as a kind of methodology, and what are the kinds of questions that need to be asked of the tools, of the of the processes that we're designing. And in many ways, one of the questions around generative design, one of the agencies of the designer is to actually design the design process. And so I'd love to just open this up for the next 15 or so minutes that we have left to the entire group for any additional thoughts, discussions, and provocations, or you could address any single one of the presenters, or make any kind of general comments.
Maybe I should just jump in with very general comments, with the very fresh ideas from the CAAD 2018 conference, where the discussion came about the romantic architecture research and how the CAD researchers really don't cover the real life problems of architecture, and more on futuristic approaches, or for the general general themes. But now today I see that in a couple of the PhD researchers, actually it's not correct. We are also tackling the real problems, like a housing problem, how it could be really solved, because there was a harsh critic in that conference coming from the especially young researchers like you. They are a great research project, but how in the short run we can have a benefit for the world and architecture from your research area. I think that's I will make a comment on that, and I would like to really hear the panelists and our prospective PhD doctorates in this field, how they see this critic of this critic that was raised in CAAD conference.
Maybe I can contribute, or no? Sorry.
Yes, you can.
Yeah, me?
Yes,
okay, thank you.
Go ahead.
And my position, like at University of Porto, is really to think of a solution for today's problems, right? And I had like a criticism from CAAD, especially from Professor Michael Ramage, which kind of like suggested to think further in the future, maybe 50 years from now. And yes, I think it's really important to think of new materials and to think of like ways to deal with this sustainable construction business that architecture is involved. But at the same time, there are lots of concerns on how we can like introduce these technologies in the urgent time, right? So I really understand this position and this criticism, but I still think that it's really important for us to research and to try to solve these problems of today, because especially this moment of ours, that this pandemic moment, right? So I don't know. I'm in a balance between these two positions, like to try to respond to the urgent problems of today, and also to figure it out a possible future for us, right? Especially to benefit the industrial production and all these things. So it's quite hard for us to make ourselves in between these two, right? But even though I try still to understand and try to solve today's problems.
Can I please add something to that, if I may?
Yes, please.
Thanks, Igor. Igor and I, we were together at the CAAD PhD workshop, and Dr. Michael Ramage, he mentioned, is my advisor and supervisor, actually. Just want to say my presentation is on Wednesday, and it's about earth and architecture, and my main goal is to mitigate the effects of the construction industry on the environment. Just want to say that, of course, I agree with all the comments, and we should do as much as we can as researchers and architects to mitigate our effects and damage as an industry. But I also want to comment something. It's a subchapter of my research. We should also consider there are so many policy changes, regulation changes, and changes in building standards that needs to be taken for this research to be applied in real world. So I think that's another discussion we need to have in our research, how much of this we are allowed to apply. As a research group in Cambridge, we are questioning this a lot in terms of timber and earth and other materials. So just a food for thought for everyone. Thanks.
If I can also comment, would that be?
Please go ahead.
In terms of what I've noticed as a researcher and as a young architect, is I think that as a society of architects and as a group worldwide, I think disruptive research and disruptive ways of introducing ideas and research into the field of general engineering, I guess you can call it, might be a way of getting some of our very intricate designs and intricate ideas into the field. I think an approach, like a classic approach of using time as a method to implement new ideas, might be, I guess you can call it, a little bit out of date. I've noticed through my research that especially in the gaming community, that disruptive engagement of different methods is really a way to change the entire field. I mean, it just makes everything work faster and makes everything more, I guess, I'm at a loss of words. I think it makes the world change in a desired fashion a little bit faster than the traditional way. So thank you.
Maybe I can comment also on that, because I think it's a great topic, and probably you're absolutely right, Bartosz. If you talk about the gaming industry, if you talk about the built environment, we have, at least in Germany, we are favorite for regulations. So it's quite difficult to change everything, you know. At the moment, really hot debate is also how AI is affecting the build industry. And regulations are made in terms of norms and ISOs, in terms of Europe and that stuff, because this is a way how we can act in a certain way a little bit faster than laws. You know, a political law takes ages and that stuff, and we are very slow business. And maybe that's good that we really have these fresh PhD topics, which are also all kind of very specialized. But this research needs to be done in order, you know, to tackle kind of new questions and to get on site maybe in 5-6 years. On other areas like the BIM research and that stuff, sometimes I have the feeling that the industry is even faster than the research at universities and that stuff. And that's quite interesting. So I would say what's at the moment the PhD research, and maybe you do your research for 3 years, 4 years, and that stuff becomes a very interesting debate then, because then becomes reality on the building side. So that's my personal point of view, and maybe that's a time frame, you know, why reality sometimes in architecture is a little bit slower than the research.
Can I, if there's no, I don't want to jump as a second time, but if there's no another.
Jump in.
Where Dagmar left, Dietmar actually left us. There is a question about the CAD research that it is not done with the industry. There's no that much industry involvement, because as Dietmar pointed out, BIM is related really with the industry. Like whatever research is coming out should be applicable research. So how much are we in the CAD world into applicable research area, and should we have more hands in the applicable research to have our like strength in that area? Maybe that we have to really question that. And applicable research really comes with the industry nowadays. Before it was coming from the universities, but the roles has really changed. So it requires working with the industry in the construction and architecture field as well. And how much we are into that, because we are in CAAD, in our organization is also discussing a lot how we should bridge the gap between the academia and the industry, especially in the CAD research. In architecture, we have the strongest hands really to bridge that gap, considering other areas in architecture. So how much we are doing in that, maybe we have to really question, because we are all here, it's the CAD organizations, question ourselves as well and our research agenda, and how we should really have more impact into the world architectural and construction arena in the near future, because if we don't do that, somebody will do it. I see in that way.
I think that's a really good point. That's something that we've been discussing a lot as well. But I also think that it's, you know, the more I look at it, it's not necessarily all our fault. The research, the building industry, I think, invests something like in North America, like 5% in research, unlike any other, you know, unlike other fields like medicine or automobiles or any other. And many of you, I'm sure, have seen I think it's the World Economic Forum report that has the construction industry, which hasn't changed in kind of almost 50 years, and kind of has yet to really adopt computation and digital digital technologies. And so, from what I understand from other researchers doing research on research, that this is changing, and hopefully that's good news for us. But I think that, you know, I think that, we need to, the construction industry and the building field needs to really come along, and hopefully we can start making those kinds of productive connections in the future. Maybe we're coming on to almost, yep, maybe.
It's Wilson from Brazil. I just want to add on this topic of getting closer to the industry. My research, it's going to be about that tomorrow, so I'm going to talk a little bit more. But talking about COVID period, it's been a really challenge to get closer, of course, and interact in the industry. So this is another challenge that we have to face now, because all the connections and all the experiments that we had to plan and for this interaction, we had to stop lately. And also another topic is the agreements between universities and industry. At some stage, it's a challenge to make this type of agreements, because there's a lot of policies and intellectual properties also going on. So this is one of the things that we have to face, right? Okay, that's it.
Sorry, and I would like to make one comment, if I may. It's very short, and this is something I have been reflecting a lot lately. By the way, my name is Juan Pablo. I'm a doctoral student at the Harvard GSD. So at the Harvard School of Education, they have this concept of usable knowledge, which they coined to sort of as a strategy to sort of bridge the gap between research and practice, which is apparently huge in education. And I think it really applies to us as well. And the way they think about it is sort of how we can deliver research and knowledge in a way that is sort of as ready to use as possible. And I think that when I see the work that are presented in conferences and journals, it seems to me that it's sort of very descriptive and expositive, right? You show what you did and you sort of bring the methods and so on, but rarely you see the extra step to sort of package everything in a way that can be reused, whether it's a repository, although that happens quite often, but sort of as design guidelines or sort of some sort of knowledge that can be translated to other domains easily. So I think that is interesting. It's maybe overlooked in a way, right? How do we disseminate knowledge? What is the exact format that makes it the most useful and that sort of maximize impact?
That's great. It's kind of who is the audience of our knowledge, and a lot of the time we talk amongst ourselves, and so maybe what we need, something that kind of I'm getting out of this conversation is perhaps it's also about thinking of other audiences and in the work, and I think that's something that's really valuable, especially for young PhD students, to think about the various audiences of your work early on and how that might shape it. We are at time, and so yeah, I know we could keep going. It always happens just as you get to time, though the whole conversation warms up. But I'd like to try to call this today's session to the workshop to a close. Hopefully most of you will be back tomorrow. We have 2 more days, and so hopefully some of these conversations can kind of continue. And I'm glad to see some of the presenters from tomorrow and Wednesday session here. And so hopefully we can have some more of these conversations as we discuss tomorrow's presentations and on Wednesday. So I'd like to give a virtual round of applause to all of the student presenters and all of the panelists. So thank you very much. I'll clap audibly because my volume's on. Would you like to say anything before we close out, Birgul or Corey?
Actually, we had the polling, I think, results. Thank you, everybody, for joining. And no, thank you. It was really a very fulfilling discussion. And I'm quite sure that we will continue tomorrow and the day after that with this very interesting discussions that all of us will benefit from it. Thank you for joining.
And I want to just realize that I did not properly thank both Birgul and Koray Bignal for really doing a lot of the legwork in organizing all of the sibling organization presidents, and then setting up the amazing website and all of the kind of and Koray doing all the kind of back-end technical organization and herding everyone into place. So thank you for all this work.
Thank you very much. And I would like to also mention that Koray and me were not alone in this event. We had a backup support from our PhD students, Orkun, Begum, and Sevgi. And I would like to also thank to them who gave a really good support to Koray and me as well. Thank you.
Okay. Great. Well, we will see you all tomorrow, same time.
The same time today. Okay. Yeah. Right. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.